It's weird to think there was a time where I didn't consider Jet the Hawk for a racing game. We all know that one era of Sonic where most of the cast felt genuinely off limits. And it wasn't just Sonic either. You saw franchises like Rayman get rid of the original cast, Mario would reject original designs in favor of recognizable creatures from the retro games, and Pac-Man turned into whatever this was. It was a bizarre era for platforming freaks such as myself. It makes sense for brand recognition, but it's lacking in flavor. The people that have been there for every entry, like me, don't really get anything new out of this. We aren't rewarded for having investment in the existing cast. Now, why is it so damn important that we have our favorite little silly characters in a racing game? Well, racing, sports, and fighting games always allow us to see sides of characters that we usually don't get to see in the linear story-based games. For example, how often are you stopping to smell the roses in Sonic and the Secret Rings? The only aspects of Sonic's personality you're really going to remember come from automated cutscenes or boss fights that are guaranteed to happen. But when you play the party mode, there's a greater range of interactions and animations he gets to have in the slower paced multiplayer. There's also a ton of unique scenarios where you get to see Sonic interacting with other beloved cast members that aren't even present in that game's story mode. You get to see Sonic and all the other characters' personalities shine through inside the gameplay. A lot of why you're going to pick characters that aren't the mascot of the franchise is because you just want to hear from them. You want to see their reactions to things. You want to see how they interact. It's always a treat to see them do something new. In some spin-off games, you'll even get unique dialogue to feed your addiction to fictional characters. It can be a special bonding experience with your favorite characters when you aren't forced to control the mascot of whatever franchise. That being said, let's talk about actual racing. One of the most memorable aspects of SEGA All-Stars Racing and SEGA Transformed was the supporting dream cast of characters. You had characters that were loosely relevant to that period with Samba de Amigo, Ai, Ulala, Beat, Shadow the Hedgehog, and of course, the Heavy from TF2. As cool as this was, many Sonic fans, my younger self included, never really cared much for the crossover aspect of these games, and mainly fixated on the Sonic-specific portions. The Sonic characters even had their adventure-era theme songs when going All-Star mode. It was awesome. And this is where Team Sonic Racing comes in. Finally, after almost a decade, we have a new kart racer with just Sonic characters and locations. Except there were a few disappointing aspects of this game in my eyes. Several of the tracks were reused from the All-Stars games. Ocean View, Dart Arsenal, and Roulette Road were extremely similar to the past two games, from layout to actual assets. And it was extra underwhelming to me considering that was 3 of the 8 tracks in the game. I wasn't really getting to see anything new and different, a part of Sonic's world. Well, at least we get to eat with the brand new character appearances, right? After all, All-Stars Racing only had 8 Sonic characters in a 24-character roster, whereas Transformed only had 7 in a 32-character roster. Honestly, Transformed is one of the funnest racing games I've ever touched, even rivaling Mario Kart 8 for me. But this was not much of a Sonic game. It was an off-the-walls crossover game. Team Sonic Racing, on the other hand, was the first Sonic-only racing game in like 9 whole years, yet it only had 15 characters. That is much smaller than the rosters of the SEGA All-Star games. What was even more confusing about this was the fact that it was a game designed for 4 teams of 3. You'd think there would be a larger character variety, especially since we're able to take advantage of this being restricted to one singular franchise. TSR had Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, you know, the usuals. But it also had Big, Blaze, Silver, Vector, Shadow, Rouge, Omega, Metal, Eggman, Zavok, baby! And, Ford Chow in a trench coat. It was interesting to see the 06 duo making a long-awaited appearance again, since they really only get to hang out when the Olympics are on, and it was really nice to have a single third of the Chaotix. A very bizarre decision to only include Vector, but I guess that makes him more novel to main him, considering that, I guess? Nobody really knows why Zavok is here. Sonic Team desperately just keeps trying to force the Zeddy down our throats. They were fine once in IDW and Lost World, but they don't really need to return, man. To make a long story short, it felt like the new additions to Team Sonic Racing weren't enough, in my personal opinion. Zavok and Chow. Really? Like, I'd like to see the Chow return in CrossWorlds, but only because we have basically everyone else I could ask for in a Sonic game. There are so many other candidates Sega should have gotten to before putting a meme pick in TSR. In general, a lot of the cast in TSR is returning from the All-Stars games, which also contributes to this roster having little impact for me. Here's an interesting tidbit for you. Sonic Free Riders and All-Stars Racing released in the exact same year. Two Sonic racing games were competing with each other. And the sad part? Free Riders was plagued by the forced Kinect controls, and it was an Xbox exclusive. Poor Jet and all the Extreme Gear fans had to suffer for... holy shit, 15 years? Jet didn't even appear in anything besides the Olympics, Black Knight, and Rumble in this entire time period. I feel sick to my stomach for all the hardcore Jet fans out there. This was long overdue in CrossWorlds. The Rogues weren't even considered for Team Sonic Racing. How crazy is that? In fact, according to a Sega lore manager, they actually had to fight for the right for Extreme Gear to appear in a new racing game at all. That's how poorly Sega perceives riders. And for many people, myself included, Sega's willingness to soft return to riders was a huge selling point of CrossWorlds. Like, the general public's reception of Sonic Racing is basically just Sonic Kart, despite functioning entirely differently than Mario Kart. All-Stars Racing shares a lot of similarities with Mario Kart on a surface level, especially the transformed mechanic. Sega's take on that mechanic came out a whole year after Mario Kart 7, which was really tragic timing. It completely blurred the lines between what made these two racing games distinct. Meanwhile, Riders was inspired by skateboarding and had a futuristic setting. It was like extreme sports at deadly speeds. I feel this was the best identity for a Sonic racing game. The aesthetic of the older games like R and Drift are neat too, but they're not nearly as memorable as the original Riders. And I think that was very healthy for Sonic trying to compete in a Mario Kart world. That being said, in Sonic Racing CrossWorlds, we're not discarding the decade of Sonic's legacy as a race car driver, because Extreme Gear and race cars get to exist in harmony. This is really cool to me, because it's a fascinating implication of how Sonic's world functions. Some people can afford hoverboards, and some people just drive. And in this game, the race cars have the same speed as the Extreme Gear, which is really neat because you could think about it in your head like, oh, I guess the Donpa just has that advanced of technology and has that much of an interest in racing that he actually made it rival Extreme Gear. That's pretty neat. CrossWorlds doesn't discount our recent history with race cars, while still letting us know that Extreme Gear is a valid and real part of Sonic's world. It fits together in a really cool way. And that's what the Babylon Rogues represent to me. A bridge between some random racing spin-off and a deeper part of Sonic's world building. When the brand new parts of a spin-off game feel as valid as the main lines, it's way easier for me to be interested, which is why I actually care about Sonic Riders. It has new lore, it has new cities, it has new characters. Usually you would only see new characters in mainline games. Jet is a great inclusion for CrossWorlds because we get to see more than Shadow rivals Sonic in an actual mainline game. Sonic is going head-to-head with Jet, Metal Sonic, Knuckles, Shadow, Silver, and whoever else has beef with him that day. It's like a Sonic Rivals game in that sense. It's nice to have Jet's presence back. Everybody wants a piece of the protagonist, and it's awesome. Wave and Storm don't go overlooked by any means either. They have strong rivalries with Sonic's crew as well, allowing us to flesh out side characters completely separate from Sonic's influence. That's not something you would probably ever see in a mainline game these days. I loved watching Knuckles and Storm trade blows in one of the more recent IDW arcs, so it gave me literal chills to see Storm smack talk Knuckles in full HD with a brand spanking new model. They even acknowledge it's been a while since their last meeting. That's the really special part about CrossWorlds, is the fact that we get to hear their thoughts on the world around them. We get to have their acknowledgement that, yeah, I mean, we don't see the rogues at all anymore. Like, conceptually, seeing someone as underrepresented as Storm getting a new model, top-notch voice work, and unique dialogue just for him is something that I could have only dreamed of when I was younger. This is the exact thing that I've wanted out of these character inclusions since All-Stars Racing. Everyone gets a moment to shine all on their own in CrossWorlds. If Storm is treated this well, I can only imagine how good the mainstay characters are going to be in this game. The fact that characters get to speak and comment on their environments and interact with each other makes their inclusion much more meaningful than if they were just here for the sake of it. And one of the smartest things SEGA has invested in recently is Sonic's writing. There's always been interest in Sonic's world and characters all the way back in the Genesis days, but it seems like SEGA only recently discovered what they had these past few years. The idea of including Storm in a new Sonic game wouldn't have been appealing to SEGA before, but now that they understand everyone has passion for the cast's characterization, there's a future where everyone can get more than one game to shine. Even Mephiles got his shot again. The sad part about characters not having more than one game to shine in is that it doesn't just apply to the quote-unquote niche characters, it also kind of applies to the main cast themselves. Knuckles was a shell of himself up until Frontiers gave him the respect he deserved. It's been like almost a decade and a half of silly Knuckles. Amy still has some inconsistency, but she's finding herself again in IDW, and for what it's worth, I enjoyed her just fine in Frontiers. We don't have to even talk about Tails. We all know what was up with Tails in Forces. Like, if characters this integral were mishandled and underutilized, imagine how fans of characters like Silver and Espio feel finally getting to hear them interact meaningfully with the rest of the cast instead of being a prop for the plot. Espio should have been such a badass these past couple of decades, but his best moments were always in niche spin-off media. In the most recent trailer for CrossWorlds, he gets prominently featured as a rival, with a Chills voice line calling out Sonic. I think Espio needs another big performance in an actual game. He's got the design, the voice, and the skills to pull off something amazing, and I'm genuinely glad he's getting attention again. This is huge. In general, I'd say the average person doesn't really even understand the hype that Sonic fans have for the extended cast. And I can't really blame them either, because the extended cast hasn't even been used in a decade. For example, Cream is beloved, yet it took somewhere between 10 and 20 years before she had an important role in the plot again. It really depends on what games you count as important for the timeline, but that's still a ridiculous amount of time for a character to not be used, whichever way you slice it. You have these characters with interesting abilities and potential, but large lapses in their appearances make it really difficult for fans to maintain their attachment to them. Like, a person's life can entirely change in 10 years. How in the world is somebody supposed to stay obsessed with Espio when he gets nothing? The success of Frontiers and Sonic 3 more or less reminded everyone why Sonic was a big deal in the first place. They nailed the core concepts of the franchise's cool factor and got people to care again. So it's brilliant that our next step is to reaffirm the greater cast's potential and their personalities. I don't actually think there's many platforming franchises out there where people care this much about the personality of the people that are in this universe. When I was a kid, I always thought it was enchanting to see characters like Silver and Blaze appear in Secret Ring's side mode, so I'm really happy that the first relevant spin-off in Lord knows how long features just about everybody that you should learn about as a new Sonic fan. When it comes down to it, Sonic's cast was pretty much finalized back in Sonic Heroes. If you have all the characters from Heroes, you more or less have everyone that you need. It's insane that the past few kart racing games couldn't even live up to that, and I believe it was mostly because SEGA didn't have the confidence that players would even appreciate that level of effort. In my opinion, CrossWorlds also stacks another W because it isn't just the heroes teams as the roster. We have 06 characters, Sage, who's an incredibly important part to the franchise considering how impactful Frontiers was, Metal Sonic, who's been criminally misused in the past decade. I mean, that guy seriously needs some more moments, man. The Babylon Rogues, which I went over, and of course, the Zeddy, baby! In CrossWorlds, we're covering nearly every important aspect of the franchise with this roster. And I'm pretty damn satisfied with it, if you can't tell. And especially when it comes to spin-offs of platforming games, I'm really not used to them including the most recent characters and locations from the franchise. Like, take Mario Kart for example, we haven't really seen returning locations that are full-on references to older games since, like, the Wii and DS era. Like, it's really bizarre that we don't have, like, Steam Gardens from Mario Odyssey as a track or something. We don't even have Cappy has, like, some kind of cameo in any of the more recent Mario games at all. I think part of that is because game development usually happens years and years in advance, so it's difficult to plan these kinds of things. And I think a little bit of it as well is the fact that Nintendo doesn't really care to maintain a presence for some of these characters. And honestly, that's just part of why I'm so giddy about CrossWorlds' roster and locations. Like, we are getting to see Superstars, Frontiers, like, Shadow Generations. In the past, in the All-Stars era, I wouldn't see these at all despite really wanting them. In CrossWorlds, we're covering nearly all important places in the franchise. Now, I don't want to spark a Mario Kart versus Sonic racing debate, but I do feel the need to compare CrossWorld's roster to Mario Kart World. World undoubtedly has the best roster in any Mario Kart game. Similar to CrossWorlds, it also covers a lot of bases with the franchise by having most of the characters you'd associate with Mario as a whole. Yet, Nintendo still decided to exclude someone as iconic as Diddy Kong in favor of a random NPC like Snowman. The whole idea of Mario Kart World's roster is basically just, haha, this would be so funny if we put this guy in the game. But as someone who's genuinely interested in Mario's mythos and history, it feels disappointing to see a brand new spin-off game once again throw away the opportunity to celebrate other parts of this franchise. And don't get me wrong, I love Penguin, Charge and Chuck, Pianta, and Spike, but I'd really prefer if these characters were bonuses they threw in after including some completely brand new reps. Now, I'm not necessarily asking for, like, the entire cast of WarioWare or anything like that, but I'd love acknowledgement of some of the crazier characters we've met over the years. Goombella is more relevant than ever right now, yet we only get a regular Goomba with no personality. In my opinion, it just feels a little devoid of imagination, and it feels like my interest in these characters is outright ignored. Yes, you do get to further explore the personalities of the existing Mario cast by giving them outfits and extra expressions, but not doing that for the random characters in the roster makes them truly feel like roster padding instead of being worthwhile inclusions. Mario Kart World's roster isn't bad or anything, it just feels like yet another missed opportunity to me. And part of why I'm making this video is because Sonic was stuck doing that exact same thing for a long time as well. But they finally understood what people like me were hoping for, and I appreciate that. People are probably going to argue that you don't need to include characters like that because the broadest possible audience won't recognize someone like Brock Monsieur. But it's not like it's actively going to turn away new players from getting Mario Kart. I didn't know who Brock Monsieur was when I got into Bowser's Inside Story, yet I ended up liking him. Why can't somebody become a Vivian fan if their exposure to her is through Mario Kart? Why can't that happen? Most people that exist know of Sonic characters from their designs alone and generally enjoy the look of them, which is why I'm happy we have such a good character spread in this game, because the people that aren't familiar with these awesome designs are going to get a taste of their personality too. They're going to get invested, and that's sick. And hey, I'll be honest, CrossWorlds has some serious roster padding too. I don't understand why we're still using the Zeddy, and I really don't think the Egg Pawn needs to be here. Like, joke characters are fun, but like I said with Team Sonic Racing, they should only be included once the bulk of the roster feels satisfying. Egg Pawn is harmless, but we don't need to keep using the Zeddy man. That could have been Mighty or Ray. Oh man, all of that just to discuss how I feel about the base roster. Let's talk about the DLC. Ironically, I feel that the free update characters are way cooler than the paid characters. Miku is a pop culture legend. She has ties to Sonic and SEGA that make her inclusion feel fitting and deserved, and her influence will probably do a lot for this game's casual player base, which, I mean, I appreciate. Ichiban is a newer face in Yakuza, but he's one of the most beloved SEGA characters already. I find this crossover fitting considering Yakuza itself is known for being off the walls, and canonically, Ichiban is a gamer. This inclusion actually held the interest of some people I know in real life who don't even care for Sonic, so again, that's another W for me, because I can, like, trick them into playing with me. Joker is in a similar position to Ichiban, but most fittingly, in my opinion, is how cartoonish Persona 5 can be. It follows, like, shonen anime logic similar to Sonic, so I really don't mind him being in this world. He was also my main in Smash for several years, so I'm extremely used to seeing him next to Sonic at this point. These SEGA characters represent, like, a modern-day SEGA All-Stars concept, and it feels refreshing in comparison to the original games because those games reused a lot of the cast for their sequel. And I'll be honest, this is the hot take part of the video. I still don't really want a Sonic racing game to be a crossover game. The character interactions and the variety of tracks makes me really excited for this game as a lore enjoyer, and I feel crossovers distract from the immersion and make it a lot more difficult for us to even establish world building in this game. The crossover characters don't even have interactions with the other characters because it's hard to fit them into the world. And I'd argue that a good chunk of why crossovers are fun for people is because we liked seeing them interact in an unfamiliar territory, yet they can't do that at all in CrossWorlds. We don't even get the fun parts of a crossover. They're just here for the sake of being here. For example, I loved seeing Shadow interact with Jet finally. They almost never talk to each other, and they get to bond over being like rivals against Sonic, and they hate each other. They despise each other. It's awesome. But then when it comes to someone like Patrick, the most fun you're gonna get out of that is just seeing Patrick next to Zabok or something. Like, huh, isn't that funny? They are beside each other. Yeah, now let's talk about the paid characters. I constantly think of this season pass as the Nickelodeon pack, considering we have SpongeBob, Avatar, and Ninja Turtles, and each of those pack has multiple characters for them as well. And I'll be honest, I didn't get the season pass. I have no interest in, like, any of these crossover characters being in a video game. SpongeBob? Okay, sure. That's a cute marketing thing I can quietly ignore. If it makes the game successful, that's fun, okay, whatever. It's bizarre, but it's a neat bonus that doesn't impact the overall game. SpongeBob's car makes a lot of sense, and it's an endearing callback to the movie. I could totally see SpongeBob shredding on Extreme Gear as well, like, that makes sense. Patrick is neat, but I don't really care for him as much because I feel he adds too much SpongeBob to a Sonic game. Ninja Turtles. Okay, weird, but I can understand some level of crossover happening considering both of these franchises are published by IDW Comics. You know, anthro animals teaming up against humans, it is a central thing between both of these franchises, but there's not much else I can relate between these two. I really did adore TMNT as a kid, so I mean, this is a cool excuse to think about them again. It'd be cool to see Raphael and Knuckles team up if they actually had dialogue together. And I mean, Mikey is basically born to use Extreme Gear. Maybe I would actually care about them more if I could hear their voices in gameplay. Like, hearing Cowabunga would be pretty damn cool while they're doing tricks. Avatar? There's absolutely no correlation between this and Sonic or video games as a whole. This is just milking an IP in my opinion. Literally the only things that could redeem this for me is if Sonic and Aang had an interaction talking about personifying the wind or something, or if Aang gets to ride his air ball like Extreme Gear. But other than that, I really don't understand how these characters fit in this game at all. I love Last Airbender, much like any sane person, but I think it's best as its own contained franchise. The aesthetics of these two franchises clash super hard, and I just don't see why it has to be here. Minecraft. this one I'm a little bit more relaxed about. It has the potential to ensure a healthy life for the game, similar to Miku, so that's a plus for me. But it's also the fact that Sonic has met Steve before through Smash Bros. Again, there's very little about these two franchises that seamlessly mesh with one another, but I do appreciate that Steve's car is a minecart. At least they got that part right. The track is really cool visually, and I'll love traveling to it, but it's a little bit of an immersion breaker for me considering how excited I was about the variety of Sonic locations in this game. Having crossovers like this feels less like I'm exploring Sonic's vast world, and more like yet another crossover game that uses whatever IPs are laying around. And I'd also go as far as to say that adding all these mishmashed different IPs with clashing art styles makes the game feel lower quality overall, not having a single direction that I can latch onto. It kind of feels like looking at an old licensed GameCube game that you see at a secondhand shop and just, you know in your soul, no one really enjoyed that. It feels like I'm looking at Nickelodeon kart racers. Pac-Man. I like this one the most, honestly. It's a simple callback to the early days of gaming, and Pac-Man is a known kart racer. He's raced both Mario and Sonic. This feels correct, and I could reasonably see his arcade track making sense in the context of CrossWorlds considering we have cyberspace and digital circuit already. And finally, the only reason I ever considered getting the Season Pass, the Sonic Prime characters. I don't love giving the impression that I'm some kind of big fan of Sonic Prime or anything. I just really love nautical aesthetics and sailing in real life, and they put all of that on my boy Knuckles. Dread is written really fun as well, so I don't mind representing him. I think his design is really cool. I also adore the concept of Nine and Rusty, even if Prime is a show for literal toddlers. Their designs are swag as hell, and they deserve a spot in a multiversal Sonic game. I mean, it just makes sense. But yeah, generally I think it's sloppy and uninspired to have every game become a chaotic crossover festival. At least with something like Smash Bros, there's a standard for who's an eligible character. In Smash, it's video game characters only. And it's usually done tastefully too, by giving them proper representation from their franchises, instead of just dangling a mascot's appearance in front of you. Meanwhile, Sonic's canon racing event has Nickelodeon in it. It feels like Gary's Mod with none of the personal choice. And there's a reason why I only cover specific mods on my channel too. Typically just the ones that feel like they could be official updates to the game, because I don't really like breaking my immersion for epic memes. Also, there's the Werehog for pre-ordering the game. It's a bit bizarre seeing him in the daytime, but I'll let it slide just for the sake of having fun. We also don't know if he's voiced at all, which is weird and sad. If he's not voiced, yeah, that's gonna feel a little bit scummy to me, especially marketing him as a FOMO pre-order bonus character. His model is great, and it's a really cool coincidence seeing him physically appear in a playable state again, considering the PC port of Unleashed released earlier this year. There's been a huge Unleashed resurgence, and it's really damn cool the way that this all lined up. It's also really neat for me personally seeing the Werehog in CrossWorlds, because there's an achievement in Sonic Racing Transformed that uses Yukawa artwork of the Werehog, and for the longest time I was like, oh my god, you can unlock the Werehog in this game? You can't. You can't. And his car is designed beautifully. Like, it's so well done that it actually gives me a reason to not select badass extreme gear. I think it's really neat that CrossWorlds is a spiritual sequel to Sonic Riders, and it could legitimately be played that way if everyone just selects extreme gear. But it also utilizes the decade of car racing that was so prominent before this. Everybody gets a little bit of both. And that being said, I'm very impressed with how this game is shaping up. I did a whole video glazing the concept of crossplay in this, but nearly everything this game is doing is stuff that I would have asked for in an alternate timeline. Again, I'm not really a fan of the crossovers, and I think the price is absolutely ludicrous. Those are really weird decisions for the game, but overall, this game looks like a huge step above the average platforming spin-off game. This is the first Sonic racing game I've ever been excited for because it feels like it'll be a worthwhile experience considering my interest in the canon. I like keeping up with the most recent additions to the world and getting tiny bits of information about how they live in this world. In comparison to CrossWorlds, all the other racing games besides Riders feel extremely optional to experience. But if you like what you heard here today, consider checking out my Dolphins Best playlist, where I have all my personal favorite videos. I like to cover platforming content, both fan-made and official, and I'm very happy I got to dive into this topic. I feel like not enough people are acknowledging how important a roster is for spin-off games, so I kind of want to put that idea out there. I'm sure there's going to be people that disagree with a lot of what I said, but hey, I couldn't stay silent for much longer, man. I feel like the roster of this game is such a good direction to take gaming.